Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, people of all fandoms, welcome to the Ferret and Raccoon podcast, episode 137. I am your one and only host for this podcast, the Angry Raccoon, and yeah, this podcast is going to be slightly different this time. As I'm sure many people know who are currently living in 2020, and yeah, I guess I'm just really going to cut the cheese and just say, yeah, things are a bit different. Things are a bit strange at the moment. As of March 2020, the world is kind of in a bit of a panic or pandemic, given that the coronavirus or COVID-19 virus has kind of been increasing in terms of cases and in terms of situations. Lots of people are self-quarantining themselves. Businesses have shut down. In the UK, schools have now been shut down, with select work buildings have shut down as well. London is somewhat of a ghost town. It's kind of tricky to even get into London as of right now. And the reason why I'm specifying these things is not to reinforce fears and panic, but just to essentially talk about what's happening in this country, in this world during March of 2020, because obviously people will be listening to this podcast in the future and they hopefully will have no idea what COVID-19 coronavirus is, because I'm pretty sure we are all going to beat this thing as long as we stay safe and stay clean for the most part. Obviously, I'm not going to be going over and hitting you over the head with the things you should and shouldn't be doing. I think that's mostly known. If you don't feel well, do not go out. Keep washing your hands. You cannot wash your hands enough, simply put. Even if you touch your face, or even if you just touch your body, even if you just keep washing your hands. That's probably one of the best ways to kind of keep yourself clean. If you do get anything, as I've already said, stay home. Do not panic. There is no real cure as of this recording for COVID-19, but it is beatable. Most people have got it and most people have beaten it, and everyone should if you stay safe and you stay smart. And that's kind of like my 2 cents on things to do. I know things are really odd right now. Things kind of feel a little bit like that scene in Shaun of the Dead when he kind of goes out to get his milk, and it's very mundane but it's very quiet. If you've seen that film, you know what I mean. But it's been very bizarre. Even for me, things have not really been of a concern until literally of this week. Week starting 16th of March. There's been a lot of back and forth between whether I will be working, whether I won't be working. As of right now, I'm not working. I'm not necessarily isolating myself. I'm just choosing not to go out because there's no need. I'm not working. But I'm kind of on standby. So I might be working. So I'm kind of trying to keep things relaxed, keep things cool. And having said that, I have a slight announcement I'm going to make towards the end of the podcast. But things have been interesting. Hopefully people are surviving. I know people are panic buying food, which is quite frustrating because it's just a bit silly at the end of the day to see, shops being so barren. The people who really need this food, aka the people who work in the NHS, the healthcare system, people who work in hospitals and such, even the elderly, they need that food more than we do. The elderly are more likely to get this virus than someone of my age, or even someone who is like 30 or so. So please be a bit considerate. Toilet paper isn't the end all. You can't eat toilet paper, nor should you. You don't need that much toilet paper. I'm just going to be blunt at the end of the day. If you still have water, just wash your ass out. You don't need toilet paper. That is a luxury at the end of the day. Okay? So that's just my 2 cents on things, because it is very frustrating. I'm not panicked, personally. I'm just worried for my grandparents, who I can't really interact with. They have not left the house in over a week and a half. So I'm concerned about them. They will be safe. I'm sure they will be. It's just a bit of a tricky situation because we kind of got to keep an eye on them and, but obviously keep our distance. But things are a bit panicked. Things are a bit manic. That is not what this podcast is going to be. I am not going to be cancelling this podcast simply because so many other things have been cancelled, which we're going to get to in a few minutes. But I wanted to make sure that this podcast still goes out, make sure things are still being normal at the end of the day. And I'm sorry if I kind of ramble on this podcast. I didn't make too many notes in this podcast. My brain has been a bit all over the place, but I typed out most of it. So with that being said, let's kind of get into this podcast. I'm going to still be talking about COVID-19 just a little bit, because I think it is very important and it is worth archiving and noting, for past and future and, present and future, excuse me. But it is interesting. It is interesting, the situation. But I think most people know what to do. I would say listen to the experts, the people who actually work in the healthcare system. Do not listen to what politicians or news outlets are saying. A lot of the time, they are saying conflicting things. Experts are saying the same thing over and over again. At the end of the day, people in the NHS want to save lives and keep you healthy. News, TV and news, they want to keep you watching. So keep that in mind. Their intent is to keep you watching, keep you fearful, and keep you invested in this story, as they want to call it. So I would say ignore that. Probably try and stay off Twitter as well. As much as it is okay, or people are going to think it's okay to joke about this virus, do it with a bit of respect. Be positive if you're going to joke about something that has taken lives. Interestingly enough, though, with people who are continuing and fighting through the virus at the moment, I've noticed that a lot of people are continuing with what they're doing, which is what I intend to do. And I think plenty of people should go out and do things that you didn't have the time to do now. Because I know some people can't work, some people have unfortunately lost their jobs. Now's a good time to play catch up on things, whether that's watching those few films, watching that TV series. Just keep yourself entertained and speak to people. Keep talking to people. Even if it's on Twitter or Facebook or by any other means, it's best to talk to people, because isolation and loneliness can drive people insane. And speaking of that, a few things I wanted to point out with the virus. I'm going to move on to it. It's not going to be a coronavirus special, but people like WWE, the Wrestling Federation, they're still going on at the moment, still going through with their storylines, but with no audience, which is a very surreal thing to look at, to see them in mostly normal clothes, the wrestlers that is, in normal clothes, just kind of talking to each other, tackling each other, wrestling each other, and there's no audience, especially when there's a particular scene where wrestler Stone Cold Steve Austin, he's essentially trying to get the crowd hyped up, and he has like beer in his hand, and he's like, "Yeah, are you ready?" And it just cuts to a shot of like an empty audience seat, and I think the commentator who's still there was like, "Stone Cold still getting the crowd excited." They're not being fazed by it, and I think that's wise. It's become even more entertaining in my opinion, and as most people have already noted, it's almost becoming very Twin Peaks David Lynch-esque. A lot of things have been over the last few days in terms of media. Another thing I wanted to point out as well is the Boiler Room, who are a internet-based events, music, hosting, gathering kind of thing. Basically, the idea is DJs, artists, they come in, they perform in this like venue, this usually small-ish crowded area with crowds of people kind of filling a room or an area, and a DJ or an artist will be playing music for a certain amount of time, and it's usually live streamed. Obviously, anyone who knows what's going on with COVID-19, that doesn't sound like a good idea. They are continuing, but instead what they are doing is they are having the DJs performing from home, and the Boiler Room are hosting the live stream, which is pretty nice and once again quite surreal. So I commend people for continuing doing what they love and continuing to support people in different ways. But yeah, those are a few things I wanted to mention. But there are a lot of other things that do revolve around COVID-19, because it is a world topic and it is very important. Once again, I'm sorry if I'm continuing repeating myself. But one thing that was quite devastating to find out for me personally was the fact that E3 2020 has officially been cancelled. E3 being one of the biggest marketing events and conventions for technology, electronics, and video games. That's been cancelled, which is a big shame. I'm not going to talk too much about the cancellation itself and what it means, because I'm going to be saving that for a much bigger discussion, which I will hopefully do with someone else. But it is sad to see. It is very interesting how a lot of companies, people who publishers and that, since it's been cancelled, they've kind of come out and be like, oh, we was going to confirm this game and that game. And I do wonder whether they're actually just lying just to drum up more hype. But we'll see. I do feel sorry for some people like Naughty Dog who are currently working on The Last of Us 2. They have had they've had pretty much the worst luck ever. They've not been able to really showcase that game too much, and it keeps getting delayed. And obviously, I'd imagine it's in crunch time now. So I don't even know. That game is like about a few months away, but I still don't think it's going to be good when it comes out. Video games are getting hit pretty hard. And it's interesting to see, what's going to become of E3 or what companies are going to do. Are they going to do live streams? Are they just going to drop a trailer on YouTube? Is it going to be better? Is it going to be worse? There's all stuff that's very interesting because with this whole situation, I'm interested in the aftermath of what's going to happen when we do beat this. Note that I say do, not might, because we are going to beat this. I'm interested to see how much this is going to affect the world forever, how much change there's going to be. There is going to be loss. At the end of the day, I will accept that. With change, there is loss. And I want to see whether that change and loss is going to be for the benefit. Another thing that was quite interesting as well is that Universal Studios, they are going to be making some of their new released films that would be in cinemas. Cinemas around the world are currently closed for obvious reasons. They are social gatherings. They're going to be releasing some of their newer releases on video on demand for you to essentially pay and watch. So films like Emma, Trolls World Tour, The Invisible Man, and maybe a few other newer films that they have coming out are going to be available for you to watch at home, which I will put a link in the description, a download link, so you can read the article I'm referring to. I think this is a really good idea. Because obviously people should not be gathering in such a mass way. It's not worth you possibly getting ill just to go see The Invisible Man. But I think this is a good idea, and I hope that Universal and other people follow suit. Unfortunately, the cinema movie experience is dying, and that is not necessarily the fault of the people who own the buildings. It is the fault, in my opinion, of Hollywood being creatively bankrupt. And also people just striving for more interesting and more exciting things, aka television, which is killing it right now. I think this is a good idea. This might be Hollywood or the film industry's saving grace. I don't really like people, to be honest, especially loud, annoying people who are talking or making noise during the film I am trying to watch and have paid for. I don't really want to sound like a social outcast, but because I will watch films with friends. I have friends come around and we watch films in my room and stuff like that. But it only takes one person to ruin your whole day. And that's one of the biggest problems with the cinema experience. So I hope this becomes a standard practice. Because what the film industry needs to do is give people option. They need to give people option. And this might be one way they can actually win back an audience, because no one's watching film, and I don't think anyone will be going to the cinema or watching film come the end of this year. That is a sad fact, in my opinion. In terms of other things I want to talk about in this podcast, because it is going to be very short, it's going to be very quick, because there were a few things I was going to talk about, but I felt that they would possibly be a bit too negative. They're not really worth talking about right now, and I want to keep things very brief soon as it is just me, and I want to give you a clean, cut, precise podcast, because I think as much as people have a lot of free time, I do not want to waste said time. Some people are still working and some people are extremely busy, so it's probably best that this podcast be streamlined. So, excuse me, I got to change my notes real quick. Oh god, sorry about that. I didn't write down anything, so I'm currently checking via my computer. Sorry if I sounded weird there for a sec. But 3 main trailers I'm going to talk about, all animated, because I love animation. And hopefully they are kind of trailers that kind of fell under your radar, and hopefully they are something for you to look forward to and something interesting to know and learn about. And the first trailer is something I did not know anything about, and that is going to be Central Park. This is an animated New York musical-based animated series coming from, I think, someone who was a key creator, a key worker on Bob's Burgers, which is a fantastic animated adult TV series. And watching the trailer, and it is going to be a Apple TV exclusive, which is like, whatever. I really don't know what to make of it, because the art style is so similar to Bob's Burgers, and I find that to be rather disappointing, because it almost feels like they're just leeching off the success of Bob's Burgers. I honestly would have liked it to visually look different, because that's Bob's Burgers art style. I don't really want to see it anywhere else, which I find quite disappointing for the most part. And it's a bit all over the place. It feels too much like Bob's Burgers, which is my main complaint with this series so far. It could be the funniest damn show ever made, but it just lacks originality, and I have a feeling that most people are going to look at this and go, "Oh, it's just Bob's Burgers. It's just Bob's Burgers, but set in Central Park in New York." I don't really know what to make of this series, and I am a bit upset. I hate it when people come off successful shows, particularly cartoons, and they just try and do that show again. Not to say that Central Park is just a ripoff of Bob's Burgers, but there were a few scenes and few key moments that were definitely very reminiscent of that. I mean, one of the voice actresses, in Bob's Burgers is there, Kristen Scholl, which is fine. I love Kristen Scholl. I think she's fantastic. A bit worried she's kind of playing the same character here. Her character looks very similar to Louise in Bob's Burgers. Even the dynamic, not the Bob's Burgers dynamic of, 3 children, 1 male, 1 female in terms of husband, wife. The scene we're in the kitchen felt very much like Bob's Burgers. But there are interesting things I do like about it. The musical aspect of it, I think, is absolutely fantastic. There aren't a lot of animated shows right now that I can think of that are, through and through, full stop, a musical. And I would love to see how the writing and the performance of the singing goes, especially if it's going to be, let's say, a song and episode. I want to see if it gets very operatic, very theatre-based. That would be quite nice. I'm also very interested in the main villain of the series, some old lady who has like a dog on a baby strap, which is really weird, because when I first saw that, I was like, and I was wondering, are they going to make like a joke about like the dog possibly breastfeeding on the woman, which might be an easy joke, but whatever. I'm interested to see how that's going to work. And the other saving grace with the series, as well as the villain, a constant villain, is the fact that it seems like we're going to be following multiple characters that aren't just necessarily connected to the main family, which could be interesting, especially if they intertwine or don't intertwine, to kind of really make the series and the whole aspect of Central Park kind of feel more interwoven, for example. So there's positives with this series. I don't have Apple TV. I don't know a lot of people who do, but I have a feeling this series might struggle, which is a bit of a shame, because it could be good. But next trailer we want to talk about is going to be for Disney's Soul, which is its first official trailer, because there was a teaser trailer that I watched, and I immediately finished that trailer and went, right, I'm going to wait for the official trailer. And I've been waiting for this trailer for a little while now. And it's an interesting one, this film, because immediately you see that it's starring humans, which is always interesting to come from Disney Pixar, especially the main character being a black character, which is also very interesting as well. But as the trailer goes on, and it kind of becomes very apparent that once again it's going to be one of those films that isn't following, a white American character, but instead following a foreign character, which is always cool to see more diversity, because that's always interesting, especially, around the world and such. And it is unfortunate that once again that we have a foreign human in a whole film being the main character, and Disney and other parties, because other people do this, Disney won't let them be their race for a whole film. They got to become something else. It happened in Coco where the main character becomes dead or a skeleton. I'm not necessarily sure what he was referred to as. And once again, the black guy has to become this generic looking cartoon character so that the audience, I guess, can relate to that, because I guess the general public can't relate to a black man who plays music or teaches it. I find it very disappointing. It kind of feels like teasing to some extent. Like, I'm not necessarily like one of these people who are on Twitter or Tumblr going, you need more this and that in film, because it's going to happen. The main reason why there isn't so much diversity is because, there's lots of oppression for the most part. There's still a stigma. But compared to Sony with Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, that had a very predominantly diverse cast, and it didn't even make a big deal about it. The main character, Miles Morales, was black. We had 2 female characters, one of which being anime inspired / Asian, full stop. Very diverse, and like I said before, didn't make a big song or dance about it neither. It was diverse because it was doing its thing. It wasn't trying to shove some kind of point down your throat about, oh, black people great. No. With this trailer, I get the sense that it's very surface level with what they're saying and what they're trying to do for the most part. And I get it. I get what this film is trying to do. I get it. It's the world of souls. The film is called Soul. Jazz music, which is derived from soul music, which came from, black artists at the time during the early days of music, let's say like 1940s, 1950s, 70s, 60s, right before it became commercial. The main character is black. He plays jazz music, because that's all black people can do, which is a really unfortunate stereotype, something that Disney back in the day did there. There was a very famous Mickey Mouse cartoon where he is in the Congo and the black people are going to eat him, and then he basically saves the day and stops himself from being eaten by essentially giving them instruments, and they immediately start playing jazz music. Stuff like that happened, and it feels a bit silly. I mean, maybe it's just because I know a lot about this kind of stuff. I mean, blues is also a form of jazz music, which is interesting, which once again comes back to the whole fact that it was originated from soul music. It's a form of soul / jazz music. The blues, obviously, all the characters are blue, I get it. Jazz, also there's the jazz label, Blue Note. I get it. You guys did your research on jazz music. I understand the connections you're making. I get it. But it just feels kind of surface level, and I really hate that, because I love the Disney films that kind of take place in very different worlds or very interesting worlds. That's why I love films like Zootopia, because it felt very much real. Here it just kind of feels a bit like they're using this as a very safe, plain marketing gimmick, which is a shame, because they could have done much more with this concept. Sorry, I just had to get more notes up. I mean, the problem is I don't like about this film as well is it has a plot I've already seen before. Like, I mean, it's very similar to the Emoji Movie, or Wreck-It Ralph, for example. Essentially you have a character going to another world, they're possibly running away from something. They meet a like rebellious outcast female character that, kind of doesn't really like the world, doesn't think they're meant to be here in that kind of sense. And they essentially, team up and kind of build some kind of connection. It's been done before, and I really don't like that. I mean, it's a shame, because I wish there was a little bit more intrigue and interest with what they're kind of talking about, in terms of like, soul and music and that. Like, as of right now, I'm not really seeing a real expression or a visual expression of what music can do to your soul, or what it can, like in a visual sense, you know what I mean? Like, it'd be nice if they made like comparisons to the hardship of like being a struggling musician or wanting success so bad, but they did that through jazz music, like by visually showing it or visually showing animation as he plays. You can literally see the passion as he plays with like little animations of color and stuff like that. I'm not seeing that kind of stuff, and that's something Disney has done in Fantasia, where they took classic pieces of orchestra and they animated towards that. I would love sequences like that. But no, we kind of just have this, we're going to spend time in this zany, plain world. I think it's a real missed opportunity. I mean, especially things like a good few examples of kind of like using music in a way to kind of transport you or kind of show the power of music. If you look, like things like Parappa the Rapper or Parappa Rapper 2 on PlayStation 2. Also, there's the failed pilot Two Dog Band. Oh no, Three Dog Band, excuse me, which has a fantastic music sequence towards the end. I'd highly recommend Three Dog Band if you've never seen that. It's fantastic. And I get that their world is meant to be like abstract, it's meant to be ambiguous, it's meant to be kind of plain. I mean, you know, that makes sense, especially when you're comparing it to the real world, which is hyper detailed and it's very interesting, it's got lots of color in that. But it honestly just feels like this world is still missing something. Like, it's not memorable. Like, I remember the world of Coco, I remember the world of Zootopia, I remember the world of Toy Story, I remember the world of Coco, because they had interest, they had design, and I feel like we're missing that. I think like it's too skeletal with what they've done, and it is a bit silly, and I don't really like some of the underlining themes or messages that are kind of coming through with how souls are made, almost as if their interpretation is that your character or your identity or whatever is kind of defined before you were even created or born, which is not the case. Almost as if they're implying that change is not inevitable, or, you know, you can't change, you are, you know, almost set to fail or set to struggle or something like that, which is kind of wrong, especially when you're incorporating that with a race that hasn't always been on top. But I digress. For the most part, it's disappointing. It's disappointing, honestly, and I'm not really a big fan of what's going on in this film, personally. And the last trailer I'm going to talk about, which is very brief because it's not much really happens in it. It's kind of just more of a, oh, here's some scenes, here's some concept stuff, and that is going to be the Midnight Gospel, which is the new animated series from, I believe, the creator of Adventure Time. This one's going to be on Netflix, and it looks like it's definitely going to have some of those more psychedelic, weird, out there, oh, get smoke some weed while you watch this kind of show. It does look weird. I like the fact that it kind of takes place in this kind of weird futuristic alien planet. Kind of reminds me of some of the planets you would see on Rick and Morty, which is kind of cool, and it looks interesting. And it's worth noting because it's something different again, and I'm glad that people have got work since Adventure Time. But I definitely wanted to mention this trailer. It looks nice. I am worried it's going to be a little bit too abstract, and I have a feeling it might be a little bit meaningless, because there's a lot of scenes in that where I'm like, oh, what the hell's going on? Because as much as Adventure Time was a bit like all over the place and kind of a bit silly, there was a lot of meaning, sometimes disturbing meaning, in what they created and what they told. So I'm hoping that there's going to be some of that in this series. And yeah, I guess we can pretty much wrap this podcast up like we always do. I don't really have a video of the episode to really, you know, kind of put down in the description and that, and the download link. So I guess as soon as I've mentioned it, we're going to make the video of the episode Three Dog Band, the pilot. I'm going to find a link of that, and hopefully you guys enjoy that. I think it's kind of appropriate. I think it's something that people haven't seen before. It's quite uplifting. It's quite funny. It's not very long. I think it's like less than 10 minutes, so I'd highly recommend it. It's one of my favorite failed pilots. Also, the song at the end, oof, so strong. But yeah, something for you guys to watch and hopefully be singing in your head over the next few weeks, hopefully not. One other thing I want to say before I end this podcast is that over the course of next week, starting from the 23rd of March, so after this podcast goes up, which is the day it's going to go up, I'm going to be live streaming. I'm going to be live streaming on the channel Angry Raccoon 1. I don't know the exact time. It will be roughly around about 2-3 p.m. UK standard time. If not, I will definitely put a kind of I don't know what you call it, like schedule an event, so you guys know when it will be, what I'll be playing. Obviously, I'm going to keep the stream up, so you guys will have tons of content to hopefully watch if you miss it. I don't know how long I'm going to play for. It's mostly going to be PS4 games for the most part. We're going to have some fun, hopefully, so come down and chat to me in the comment section. I would love to grow the audience a little bit more, hopefully chat with you guys, because I know there might be some people who are in situations where they are quite lonely, and even if I can just speak to one person, even if it's just my friends, because even right now, as I'm sure you've noticed, a lot of my friends aren't on this podcast right now, and it's best they stay away. So it'd be nice to communicate with them doing things we enjoy, which is video games. So I will leave this, or I'll end this podcast like I always do. Oh, also, if you want, you can hit me up on Twitter at RaccoonAngry, only one C in the raccoon. I don't really speak on Twitter, but if you do message me or tweet at me, I will get back to you. I mean, nothing really happens on that Twitter. You can also email me regarding this podcast at raccoonplusfriends.gmail.com, and you can get to me from there. Here's hoping things get better, guys, because they will get better. I don't know why I said hope. They will get better. I guess what I mean is hopefully things clear up faster than later. Because I know there are like very worrying things people have said, oh, it's going to last 12 weeks or it's going to last a year. It's not. That's just fear-mongering coming from the government, because they don't give a shit about whether people die or how many people die. All they care about is the fact that the economy is losing more and more money. And it is not our fault. It is their fault for fucking things up. Yeah. So stay safe out there, guys. Stay clean. Shower as much as you can. Wash your hands as much as you can. Don't go out as much as you can. Wear gloves. If you can, stay away from people. Try not to talk to people as well, mainly because, they might just, pass something over. If you do feel sick, stay inside. And just remember that there are always people who are willing to talk to you and willing to help you. There are some scummy people in this world, but there's more good than evil in this world, and that's something to remember at the end of the day. And on that note, I'll end this podcast like I always do by saying I was the Angry Raccoon, and I will see you on the next podcast.